Hi, my name is Nevern. I'm a psychologist. Here are 5 life hacks that will motivate you to do anything. I know these life hacks will work because I've literally used each one of these with a client in psychotherapy to actually help them change their lives. So, if none of these work for you, I don't know what to tell you because I'm pretty sure at least one will. Number 1 is to rely on intrinsic motivation. You see, as most of us go throughout our days, we rely on extrinsic motivation, which is basically the kind of motivation where you rely on rewards and punishments for your behavior. You let the rewards and punishments mold your behavior. In the same way that you would train a dog, you would give them a little reward or a little punishment to try to change their behavior. A lot of us treat ourselves in that way. We treat ourselves like dogs with our little doggy treat and our little punishment, maybe a little water nose spray on the snout. But what's actually better than extrinsic motivation? What's better than relying on external rewards and punishments? Is relying on intrinsic motivation. This is the kind of motivation to do something because you enjoy it, because it's your jam, because it's what you want to do. And this was first discovered by Professor Richard Ryan and Professor Edward Deasy. They've done decades of research on this idea of intrinsic motivation, and they've shown exactly how good it is for building sustainable motivation. So if you want to build really good, solid, long-lasting, sustaining motivation over time, and you want to use that to fuel your brilliance, then tap into intrinsic motivation. You can do that by asking yourself a few questions. What do I naturally enjoy? What do I naturally find meaningful? What gives me a natural sense of purpose? What do I like to do? That is how you tap into your intrinsic motivation, and then you do more of those things, or you turn the thing that you're currently doing into something that's more intrinsically motivating by making it more enjoyable, more pleasant, more purposeful, or more meaningful. As Mark Twain once said, find a job you enjoy doing and you'll never have to work a day in your life. Number 2 is to use deadlines. Deadlines really motivate us. You see, as human beings, we are wired, our brain is wired to pay attention to the short term over the long term, because the short term is actually kind of more important in a way. If you don't survive the short term, you don't even have a long term to get to. So it makes sense to focus in on the short term, and that's the way our brain is designed. Now, the problem with this is it means we're often more motivated to do things that have a short-term reward than a long-term reward. That's why a donut is so much more rewarding than engaging in a diet to eventually lose weight in the long term. So if you want to motivate yourself to do longer-term tasks, you should set shorter-term deadlines, because these deadlines will prime urgency. They'll give you a bit more of a sense of urgency. It's the same thing that happens when you're in university or you're in school and you have a month to finish an assignment, but you do it the day before or the weekend before. I hope that wasn't just me. But you see, it's more motivating when that last weekend or that last day arrives. You're like, oh snap, I need to get this done because of the deadline. The deadline has created a short-term incentive. So chop up a long-term project into shorter-term deadlines, and it will prime urgency and it will tap into the part of your brain that is more used to short-term work. Number 3 is to find a sense of purpose. You see, most of us are unmotivated on our day-to-day because we don't have a bigger sense of purpose, something that brings our life meaning, some bigger goal that we're aspiring to, some bigger problem that we're trying to solve. We don't have something where we can be of service that goes beyond ourselves. And it's important to have something bigger, some bigger goal, some bigger purpose, some bigger meaning, because once you have that, everything else you're doing on a daily basis can be motivated by that bigger purpose. Let's say that your bigger purpose is to feed lots of hungry orphans. Then everything you're doing on a daily basis can be more motivating. You're showering to get ready for the orphanage that you're going to go to help. You're eating so that you can sustain yourself, so that you can be of service to these orphans. You have to go to work to make more money so that you can give more money to these orphans. You see, once we have a bigger purpose at the top of the pyramid, everything else at the base of the pyramid becomes more motivating, and you'll find that if you infuse your life with purpose, you'll be infusing your life with more motivation. As Mark Twain once said, and yes, this is the second Mark Twain quote in this video, as he once said, 2 of the most important days of your life is first, the day you were born, and second, the day you find out why. And how you can find your why, how you can find your purpose, is by asking yourself this clarifying question I ask my clients in therapy if I find that they need to connect to their purpose. It's basically this, you can write this down. What do you want people to say about you at your funeral? And if that's a bit too morbid for you, you can ask, what do you want people to say at your retirement party? What do you imagine them saying about you, about the kind of person you were, about the kind of work you did, about your character, about what you valued, about your way of being, about what you prioritized, about what you gave attention to? This is a really useful clarifying question to connect to your purpose. The fourth way to motivate yourself to do anything is to use chunking. Chunking is basically what it sounds like. It's taking something big and creating little chunks from that bigger chunk. So you're taking something really complex, some sort of long-term plan you have, some sort of mission, and you're breaking it down into simpler little parts. You see, psychological researchers have found that one of the reasons we're unmotivated is because we find the task that we need to do too complex, too big, too broad, and not very understandable. So once we encounter something that's very difficult, very complex, we shy away from it. We don't naturally want to move into that space. We prefer being where we're competent with the smaller, easier tasks. We prefer that. We feel more confident in that. So one way to give yourself the confidence in dealing with a difficult task is to break it down into little subcomponents. So for example, if you're a writer and you have writer's block because you're just sitting there, you're staring at this Microsoft Word document and you're thinking about how to create this huge story that you need to write, instead of sitting there with this blank page, you give yourself a little task. Okay, how about today, instead of writing the entire book, I just write down some of the characters that I was thinking of putting into the story. Or perhaps I can create the broad outline for the story today. So you see, in that way, you're creating little chunks, and those little chunks will allow you to feel more confident and more competent in dealing with that task. And don't worry if you're not getting to the whole thing, because as Peter Marshall once said, small deeds done are better than big deeds planned. And a last pro tip here, if you combine chunking with positive reinforcement, that is to say, if you combine chunking with rewarding yourself for the little progress that you're making over time, you'll really have a winner on your hands. Number 5 is reframing failure and obstacles. You see, a lot of us can start motivated, but for many of us, when we begin our journey, when we begin our mission, when we're trying to pursue our purpose, we will stumble into roadblocks. We will get to places where we don't know what to do, where we feel stuck. We will encounter some failures. We will encounter some setbacks. And so learning how to appropriately deal with failure, challenges, and roadblocks is extremely important if you want to remain motivated. You don't want your motivation to just disappear at the first challenge you encounter. Many of us stop pursuing what we really want. Many of us stop pursuing the kind of person that we really want to be just because we've run into some sort of failure, some sort of roadblock. At the first challenge, we turn back and we're like, nope, we start to retreat. But as Weston Gore said, making mistakes simply means you're learning faster. And that's a better kind of mindset to have. You need to reframe your mindset here around failure and challenges so that you can keep moving forward. You don't want a mindset that's going to stop you when you encounter failure. You want a mindset that can accommodate failure. Stephen McCraney has a good mindset here that you can borrow from him. It's basically the idea that the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. I'll say that again. The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. So to get to mastery, you have to accept failure. And part of accepting failure is realizing that failure has made you wiser today. It's realizing that your failures in the past, anything where things were pretty bad for you, or you were down in the dumps, or you encountered some roadblock or challenge, has made you wiser in some way. You've learned something from those situations. And the same applies going forward. It's not just in the past that you've accumulated lessons from your failures, but you will do that going forward. And so it's useful to think of failure as the opportunity to learn something new. And so in learning how to accommodate failure, learn how to become more flexible. Because as the Japanese proverb says, where the flexible bamboo bends in the wind, the stiff oak tree breaks. And as Charles Darwin once said, it's not the strongest species who survives. It's not even the most intelligent species who survives. The species that survives is the species that is the most adaptable to change. And that includes being adaptable to obstacles that come your way.